Welcome to Legends of Data and AI. Each episode includes inspiring and actionable data and artificial intelligence insights from global leaders across industries. Your host, Dr. Usama Fayyad, was the first Chief Data Officer at Yahoo and is Chairman of Open Insights and Executive Director of the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Legends of Data and AI podcast. I am Usama Fayyad, Executive Director at the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University and Chairman at Open Insights. With me today is a special guest who is a friend, a distinguished physician, scientist, immunologist, Dr. Samir Khleif, who has had a career really looking at cancer, the interactions with immunology, all the way to vaccination of potential cancers, etc., and really looking at where a lot of these efforts are heading into the future in terms of investments and so forth. So, Samir, great to have you, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Usama. It's so lovely to be with you.
So you've had a career in cancer research that went all the way from large government agencies like NIH and the National Cancer Center, and you've built your own cancer centers or helped build some, to actually working with startups and companies in the space. To get us started, how should we think about cancer research? Is it about understanding cell behavior? Is it immunology? Is it measuring or predicting the therapy effectiveness? What are the big differences and problems in these areas?
So that's a great question. And when we talk about AI, or even when we talk about finding tools to be able to make us think of those issues in a more simplistic way, it comes to cancer as one of the most complicated scientific research areas in biomedical field in general. The reason is, when we think of cancer, it is really not only what happened to the cell or the different potentials, hundreds of potential possibilities that could happen to the cell itself to lead the cell to lose control of its division and hence develop cancer, but it's also the interaction between the cell, its microenvironment, the environment in general, and how much it affects the epigenetic changes that we have, and the biology of that particular person. So we're talking about at least thousands of different points of interaction that could lead to the development of cancer or cancer control. That is short of even thinking, as you mentioned, okay, well, how then we approach the therapy? Because when we think to approach a therapy, it's not like one hit, one disease, or one hit, one point. When we talk about therapy, we really need to start thinking of that whole elements of interaction to come up with a potential solution that at this stage, we're not even there yet, right? I mean, I could give you examples. When we talk about, just to put things in perspective, so when we talk about, let's take any cancer, for example, colon cancer. If you give certain therapy to colon cancer patients, advanced colon cancer patients, 10, 15, 20% of patients respond. And even those responders, they respond to a different level, but 80% don't respond. So, well, if they have colon cancer, why don't they all respond? Because of that variability and variety of factors that affect this. So this is why it's very important to think about it from both perspectives.
No, and definitely kind of modeling biological systems and let alone the response to diseases and abnormalities is a very, very difficult problem. As we tackle these problems of understanding, cancer, immune systems, response, the therapeutics, how have computational approaches been a game changer to historically manual approaches to analyses of specimen and wet labs and so forth?
Oh, tremendous. And I could give you a lot of examples. It's not only, so one, when we talk about those variables within the cancer itself, if you take now any cancer, take 10 people with 10 different breast cancer, if you do the deep analysis of their cancer, you'll find them completely different. And when we look into deep sequencing, DNA deep sequencing, when we start looking into the omics in general, whether proteomics, metabolomics, genomics, and we put those in perspective with hundreds of data points, we can find completely different characteristics of certain diseases. That's one part. I'm going to jump now to therapy. If we think of therapy, again, one of the things that I've done is I was special assistant FDA commissioner working on trying to shorten the time for drug development and approval. And one of the major issues is to develop a drug from A to market. The average time is between 10 to 12 years and $2 to $8 billion. The reason is because most of what we do is analog based. Most of what we do is not AI driven. So when you take a structure and you start developing it to treat a disease, and that structure need to not only work on a disease, but should have good characteristics for a patient to be able to swallow it, be absorbed, becoming not toxic. Those structures are very important. So even when we think of those, or which structure could work against a disease, the AI could work a tremendous amount of miracles in helping us structure those drugs, understand how they work in human, and understand how they fit within targeting the disease molecule. These are very important revolutionary systems that we work with now every day almost. Now, we're not there yet. There are lots of work to be done, but these are at least two major areas, Usama, that we know that will be of great value to what we have. Short of now, when we talk about data mining with thousands and millions of patients' data points, and understand the behavior of certain diseases in specific population. And when we talk in specific population, could be gender, could be sex, could be race, could be specific sector of population with this specific sector of omic characteristics. I mean, those are tremendous and mind-boggling potentials for AI to make healthcare in general, not only specific treatment of medicine, a completely different landscape.
We've heard about AI and machine learning playing roles in things like protein folding, in some cases, in the drug discovery approaches. Anything in the space of cancer that's noteworthy or not yet?
Yeah, I mean, look, every company that is developing drugs will use AI in one way or the other to a certain degree. Now, are there any drugs that were developed out of the blue based only on machine learning? At this stage, I think we're getting there, but we're not there 100% yet. But I could tell you from my daily work, we work on drugs, and I have an operation inside where they work literally on identifying structures based on AI work, and we work with multiple consultants, et cetera, to do that. So our work is daily work is embedded within the AI. And I think the next 5 years are going to be absolutely revolutionary in how we do business. And I'll tell you now, we know that AI helped us a lot in developing drugs. Now, not completely AI driven, because we still have the biologic systems and et cetera, but AI helped us a lot in defining or at least modulating some of those drugs, for sure. So that's always the case. And I'm not talking about only small molecules. I can talk about small molecules and large molecules. We're working on antibodies and modeling, particularly when you talk about like things like AlphaFold or any of the or Rosetta or any of the softwares that help you fold the protein and change a protein and help you dock the protein into the target. That's a daily use. So no doubt it changed our life tremendously in the past few years.
Samir, you are involved in some startups and in investment decisions that, in companies that leverage AI for drug discovery and therapeutics. what do you look for in a company that's taking an innovative approach in the space?
So that's a great question. So first and foremost, I mean, of course, investment decisions are different, right? You talk about a team, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to tell you from at least this is what you mean by a question. Look, I think the most important is twofold. One, differentiator / impact. And second, what's the word that I'm looking for? Not reproducibility. So there's a word, it'll come to me in a second. But so does the company have the system that have already proven to be able to actually reproduce itself in a way that led to a biologically proven phenomenon, right? So these are the two major elements, because there are lots of AI-driven or machine learning. I mean, honestly, there are lots of machine learning wannabe also, and thinking that machine learning. But the two major issues that we look for, Usama, is again, is the company doing something that fundamentally is going to change the path for drug search, one, and second, have they had any the platform, is it at this stage proven and producible? So these are the two major elements that we look for.
Let me ask a question that's related to this area in general. How, and this applies to AI in many fields, but I'd be curious as to your take. How do we build trust in an AI approach? Most AI is dependent on the data you feed it, and the efficacy of modeling data depends on seeing situations in the future that we have seen before. How do you know when a situation is new or different, and hence the AI or predictive models should be questioned?
Validation. I mean, again, you know this better than anyone, but from our perspective, the most important is it validated or not validated? Is it giving us any so going back to the point, how do you build trust? I think the most important is, the first and most important is to develop something completely out of AI that works. So that's as simple as that, right? Whether it's a drug, whether it is a diagnostic tool, whether it is whatever it is, right? And by the way, in a way, we have some things in medicine that we can talk about. But so that's one. If we can definitely develop something that works, always the public, the scientists would say, well, it works, then definitely it's validated. And most importantly, we get the trust. But in the meantime, in the process, I think validation protocols are really extremely important, particularly when they embed within them biologic experimentations, which means, can I actually show you in biologic experimentation something that when I do it in an AI machine learning driven process, it gives me that same outcome? And as long as it is reproducible, that's really the most important from science perspective, from a non-AI scientist perspective, right? So if that was where you're heading to, I think that would be but if I didn't answer the question, please let me know.
Yeah, no, I mean, the part of the question that also, you know, it's how do you model change? Because change happens, pathogens and disease, viruses, mutate. Conditions change. Environment can play a role in introducing new susceptibilities that didn't happen before. A lot of these things, I guess they apply whether you're using AI or not AI. So I guess whatever mechanisms we use in the traditional approaches should apply when we use them in the traditional approach, in the AI-driven approaches. There's a lot of always fear around, well, it wasn't the human who did most of the thinking here. It was the machine that found it. And the nervousness is, did you just land on a pattern by chance? Or, is there some bug somewhere we don't know about that will manifest itself in a few years? That's usually the fear about kind of trusting AI or not trusting AI.
Sure, but you're actually putting on the table a very important issue. The first is, I mean, if we're going to look into the categories, the category that you just mentioned is predictable behavior or trend predictability. That's a completely different, honestly, than the more simplistic way. There's no simplistic, but the more simplistic way of collecting data and coming out with a specific pattern for a specific phenomenon, right? That's different, because let's take the example of COVID. So COVID in the past 2 years mutated hundreds of times. Few of those became highly virulent viruses, and they escaped our immune system. So the question is, can we learn something from COVID to implement this to other potential viruses? I don't know. I don't know, because this is a very complicated interaction between a virulent virus, a immune system reaction, and a completely diverse population. So I don't know if this is that simple. However, if you come back and say, well, if you take a structure, a chemical structure, can it fit within a certain fold? That is much easier to predict, right? Because that you can reproduce biologically, and it becomes more convincing to any scientist to say, yeah, it actually does. Here, I tried it and it does. For trend prediction, although this is probably one of the most important things where AI could work, because it's very difficult to do that experimentally, I think this is one of the most difficult areas to make it convincing. Because first of all, you don't know what's going to come in 10, 5, 20 years. And you're right, this is a machine thinking rather than a human thinking. But honestly, we don't have a human thinking, and that is very difficult to predict.
Yeah, no, that's a fair answer. A related question, startups in life sciences have had to deal with, and you alluded to this before, the long and expensive process of regulatory approvals, clinical trials, a long journey to safe delivery of a therapeutic. What can be done, especially through AI and computational methods, to shorten the cycles and reduce the risks that such startups have to take?
A lot, actually a lot. This is probably one of the most, in my opinion, advanced areas in biology or medicine or biomedical or biotech sciences. I mean, a lot. You take the cycle of drug development from identifying the protein or the target that needs to be drugged to the development of the drug against that protein, to taking that drug and make it human compatible, to predicting who of the patients with that particular disease would be most benefiting from taking that drug. This process today, every single step of it, we use applications that are AI driven. So if we want to decide on how the drug that we're trying, well, first of all, by the way, so if we define a protein that we want to target, because this is the protein that we need to correct, today, what we do is virtual libraries, right? So virtual libraries is AI driven. So we narrow down millions of compounds to hundreds to take them and try to start working on them, right? So that's the one step, and we use that every day. So as a matter of fact, we're using that as we speak. The second thing is when we do find those hundreds, you start looking at them and then you get a hit. And then that hit, you need to optimize it. So when optimizing it, a lot of AI-driven methods, you can change that structure to make it more effective in targeting that protein that we use today. And then we also use things that would make, or platforms or softwares that would make it less toxic to human. So answering your question, if I'm developing any company today, particularly in the therapeutic area or diagnostic areas, but let's concentrate on therapeutic areas, I believe that AI should be absolutely an integral part of that company. You don't have to build it internally. You can always external source, but that has to be a major part of your thinking and your development, because it will shrink the time, decrease the cost, no doubt.
Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit and go to kind of one of the important ingredients here, data. Medicine and healthcare at the high level, and healthcare in general, is going through kind of digitization as well as digital transformation, where we use a lot more devices that can measure a heck of a lot more data, record it, etc. This opens up the possibilities for algorithms to help in analysis, diagnostic recommendations, perhaps drug design. Have you seen any examples of capabilities where the impact was transformational or game-changing, or not yet?
So I'm going to narrow this down a little bit and then shift it. So are there any things that happen in medicine that were AI driven? Yeah, there are. I'll come to the data in a second. Some of them are FDA approved, right? Like the computer vision assisted image analysis, right? So this is something that now we use, and it is actually helping us in diagnostic. It's already approved by the FDA, and we use it. So there are lots of those. Now, there are many of those also coming, particularly in whole blood analysis or in particularly emerging clinical utilities in a way, detection of deep sequencing in certain diseases, virtual biopsies. So that's there. And when you think of even virtual scopes, right? So that's part of things that are becoming more and more mainstream at this stage. Now, from data point of view, which means millions of data points based on millions of data entry in population, I think this is starting to come up, but I'm not really sure that there is something that I can point to that says, well, this happened because of that. But look, I mean, one of the issues, as you very well know, we're not, I think we're more advanced in AI than in the process of AI. The problem is harmonization. The problem is natural translation. The problem is, so this is, I mean, if you look into the systems in the US, there's still, until today, despite the fact that we have all the ICDs that we've developed, there's still a lot of places where they enter diagnosis differently, or when they enter the different terms in a different way, or when they store it differently. So that's the problem, right? And this is where we have some of those impediments. This is why one of the best systems is the VA systems, because it's unified. But we need to unify this from coast to coast. And I would say this is why some of the countries across the pond, whether in the Middle East or in Europe, are even better at this.
Do you think there's enough of an appreciation in the medical and kind of life sciences communities as to the importance of data? I know this sounds elementary, but what I mean here is when it translates down to, you know, day-to-day, the capture, the management, the classification, the ability to join data meaningfully and easily, the ability to overcome, you know, quality issues in data, etc. Because at the end of the day, for all of these algorithms, you know, garbage in, garbage out. In many other fields, there's definitely a lack of appreciation, and having worked in for the importance of kind of handling data right and managing it, curating it, collecting it systematically the right way. What have you seen in kind of the world of immunology, cancer, the areas you work in, and why is it that people tend to kind of pay attention to things like AI and the cool techniques, but don't think about the basics, which are huge drivers like data?
So look, this is a very important question. I'm going to be cynical here. It's not the immunology or the cancer, it's the physicians. The physicians enter the data. And it's not only not appreciating the importance. I'm a physician. Physicians in general believe this is a burden. It's a waste of time. Because the most complaint that you hear from physicians, you know, we used to write note in 2 minutes. Now we have to sit on the computer, spend 45 minutes after we see the patients for 20 minutes. That's the problem. So is it the problem of the physician? Maybe, but it could also be the problem of data entry. in a way, can it be much easier? Can it be voice recognition, right? I can go dictate it and let it filter into the data and populate it by itself. So there need to be some techniques, or at least some methods, to decrease that burden on physicians, because the physician will come and tell you, in the 45 minutes that I spent on the computer entering one patient, I could have seen 2 more patients, right? So that's the issue. And this is why people don't take it seriously. As a matter of fact, they take it as a pain in the butt, which is a problem.
Yeah, so that's definitely part of the issue here. Another one is kind of a potentially a lack of, even at the higher levels, beyond the data entry and the capture, it's the modeling and the maintenance and the management of that data, so that it can be pieced together later for other analyses, etc. One area, since we're
that data with other places, right? And the compatibility of that data from one entry point to the other entry point. That's the other problem.
Absolutely. I always say, people sometimes record the data but forget to record enough of the context. And sometimes most of the action is in the context. And that's a fundamental problem in many fields. One last question on kind of the data and the big data, an area that's been kind of notorious for dealing with a plethora of big data and a variety of data sources, etc., is drug discovery. And some of it is kind of in the space of robotic drug discovery, where robots are trying huge combinations of chemicals and compounds, and kind of trying to hone in the search. What's your thinking around where AI can help here? And have you seen places here where it's a space where algorithms become essential just because of the size of the space and the number of combinations? How would you characterize, or how do you think about these areas and the advances there?
Yeah, I can tell you in my field, in immunotherapy field, it's very primitive. It's a very early in the development, and there is a reason for that, is because we still don't understand the biology very well. I mean, I can give you just an example. Immunotherapy, as you know, exploded in the past 7 years, right? And it affected the way we treat cancer. This is only from 2 or 3 drugs. Now everybody honed on those drugs and started combining those drugs with other type of therapy. Why? Because if this drug works, then if we combine it with other drug therapy, should work better. This is, of course, not the problem with that. Not only not assisted by AI prediction, it's not assisted by biologic data. So when we look at the number of clinical trials that happened in the past 5 years and the number of combinations that happen, I'm not exaggerating by telling you that there were at least 10,000 clinical trials that was conducted with those kind of combination, and 99.9% of them failed, because we have no system to predict what could be done except the biologic system, and in a very specific content. So this is why AI would be a very important tool to go in and actually try to collect as much data as possible from those 10,000 trials and see if there are trends, right? Now, that's a humongously different tasks, because those data are not available or did not collect the proper sequence, etc. But that would be what we need to do, because we're going to do another 10,000 and fail again without this kind of tool that would be helping us, short of real strong biologic data that could be developed. So it's very, very early in the process, and I think it's still very primitive, at least in the field that I'm working in.
Okay, then a related question here, since we're moving to the higher topics. What are the big challenges that you would be interested in seeing addressed by the field of AI? Do you have a wish list for AI practitioners who would be interested in contributing and or collaborating in your field?
Yeah, look, so this is a very open question, right? It's a huge, and we could start from different places, but something we just talked about is how you can make the life of data entry practitioners easier. And I think that's going to be major for public health issues, which means could we provide physicians, nurses with tools that they can enter the data without going through hundreds of pages at a time, clicking different places and going down and scroll. Are there any tools like voice recognitions or language recognitions that actually could populate by itself? Go back to the physician and say, here, dictate as you used to dictate, and we'll take care of the rest, right? And I believe that data scientists should be working on this because this will harmonize at the end of the day, those different terms or language terms or whatever, and we'll put them in the right place in the proper context, right? So that's a major issue. That's a very high level part. If I go more granular, at least in some of the places that I work in, particularly in drug development, I would say, development of tools that combine not only purely the rigid or the dry approach of structural modulation, but rather from the beginning develop more complex tools to integrate the biologic system within that, which means, can we really think of a multi-dimensional complexity rather than in the bi-dimensional complexity that we're currently using for drug development? I think that would be an extremely important thing. But again, I'm probably babbling things that I have no clue what I'm talking about, but that would be my wish list.
No, those are big problems, and there are companies and startups who try to address them, but I agree with you. We are, so far, as far as I'm aware, pretty far from the satisfactory solutions there. And I agree that these are fundamentally solvable problems. I've been recently working on figuring out how to change what is done in higher ed in terms of preparing AI practitioners and data scientists to have relevant skills in the working world. One of the conclusions I've reached over the years is that we need something akin, something experiential, something akin to a residency program in medical schools for practitioners of data science and AI. What are your thoughts on the missing pieces for training the right talent in data science in particular? And, thinking as somebody who has a group and has a startup and works with many companies, what do you want from universities when they produce these graduates?
Look, Usama, you hit it on the nail. The problem, at least in our area, in medicine, is we're very compartmentalized. Until recently, that we actually merged even the different systems in the different contextual subjects, right? We used to teach physiology and then pathology and then pharmacology. Until recently that we started saying, fine, let's take the cardiovascular system and teach it all as a continuum, right? It's very difficult to think of that. But now, if talking about AI in particular, the reason I said that you hit it on the nail, because I think particularly those that they need to work, the AI data scientists that they need to work in medicine, need to really understand medicine in more details. But more importantly, I believe that now, today, because everything in medicine is going to be changing bit by bit into machine learning, that should be integrated within the curriculum of the medical schools. I bet you no medical student, at least majority, leave medical school today understand what AI is or machine learning is or what the potential application that there could be, and why do I need to enter the data properly that can help me in the future. I think medical schools should absolutely have an AI to data science course that could integrate at least what they have into understanding the concept. That's very, very much lacking.
That's definitely an interesting area. My last question to you, Samir, and you've been generous with your time. What advice do you have for companies, large enterprises or new startups or government organizations even, in terms of how to think about AI as one of the tools that can potentially change the game?
Yeah, so look, my advice is you don't know what you don't know, right? And majority of the startups, majority of the big offices in government, leaders, majority of scientists do not know what they don't know about AI. or the application of AI. My advice to every new startup or every office that's working on anything is explore that possibility by bringing people 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, to tell you about the potential. So you can think and you can integrate your planning, your road mapping in a way that would actually embed AI thinking within it. Our problem is we don't know the AI and what it does and the applications, and we hear about it from here and from here. Okay, well, let me get this, but that's not the way to do it. So this is why now when I mentor some of the new entrepreneurs, I said, look, one of the things that you really need to learn, talk to AI guys, whether in the drug development or data management, understand what they do. So when you think about building this company, you might start thinking about how you want to integrate and whether you want to outsource or bring people in. But at least when you think of developing something from A to Z, you can think of integrating that AI process within it because you don't know anything about it. And I assure you that. And this is what I advise everyone.
Well, with this, we come to the end of this episode. I'm Usama Fayyad, Executive Director of the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University and Chairman of Open Insights. And I would like to thank Dr. Samir Khleif for an amazing discussion on AI, data, and their role in something that's important to us in all our lives. So thank you, Samir.
Thank you, Usama. It's been a pleasure. You be well.
Thanks for listening to Legends of Data and AI. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of data and AI. If you're keen to learn more about making data and AI work in the real world and in any organization, join us next episode and subscribe to the podcast. As always, you can head over to open-insights.com to sign up for our email list, learn more about the work we do, and have access to data resources. See you on the next podcast.